So let's say it's getting late in ladder, maybe the same build's getting a little boring, or you're on non-ladder, you've had this character forever, and you just want to try something new, but you don't want to have to try to find a rush or to play through the entire game just to try and play a new build. Well, hold up, you don't have to. Get yourself one of those Respec tokens, and you can actually completely change whatever character you have into a complete another one. But wait, Phil, don't you usually have to get a full new set of gear that works great for that particular build then? That's not always true, and that's why today I'm going over some of the absolute best builds that you can swap into a complete another build without having to go trade up or find a complete new set of gear. Now, for the sake of time, let's be honest here, Diablo 2 Resurrected, almost all casters use a ton of these same items, and that's what all these characters are going to be. So I'm going to go over the gear one time, and then for each time I'm talking about swapping builds, no matter what character it is, I'm going to use all the same gear unless I specify otherwise. Sometimes it's all literally the exact same gear, and sometimes there's a few pieces that really set the build off. And of course, there's always going to be certain ways to min-max each character, but I'm not going to min-max literally every single one of these. It's just going to be transferring over from one character to the next. And you see the lady standing right there, so you can guess when we're looking at the sorceress, we're going to be talking about swapping from a Blizzard sorceress, an incredibly common one to start ladder with, over to a fireball sorceress. And of course, it'll be no problem to swap this in the opposite direction as well. So here we're talking about if you're like in your mid 90s or something like that, swapping over to a new build when the other one got old. So you won't need to put any points into dexterity or energy for this. It's a max Vita build, just enough strength to wear your gear. 156 is usually going to be the norm for the Spirit Monarch, and then all the rest down here into vitality. Now, going over the gear right here for the sorceress, I love using the Oculus. Obviously, for most other casters, if you're not specifically the sorceress, you're going to use a Heart of the Oak right here, which I will mention when I do go over those builds later. But I love the 80 Magic Find along with everything else that comes on the Oculus. And we're looking at up here the Shaco, obvious choice for Blizzard or Fire sorceresses. Now, if you are going to the Fireballer, you could go ahead and throw a Flickering Flame up on over here. It depends on what you're doing, your preferences, how much Magic Find you want, etc., etc. Looking over the shield, usually you're going to go with a Spirit. Of course, there is the Phoenix Shield that has minus fire res as well. Incredibly expensive. That one's going to be up to you. Here we have a Mara's, a good caster amulet. Could get you to that breakpoint along with a lot of other things as well. But a Mara's is tried and true and an absolute classic. Looking here at the Enigma, this one's in a Mage Plate. Even though you already have teleport because you're a sorceress, everything else on this thing is so nasty with the huge amount of strength, increased life, and almost 100 magic find. It's based on character level, so here we have 92. I love it. Coming over the gloves, we got Trang's gloves. If you're going to fire, obviously you're definitely going to want to have Mage Fists over here, but it's not going to be a huge difference. It is one skill to fire, I suppose, so whichever one you prefer, depending on which build you're going to. We got a couple of SOJs right here. FCR rings, if you need to get to a specific breakpoint, if you just need to get a little bit higher, you could throw those on here as well, but getting the skills and the mana, absolute primo. Arachnid's Mesh, here obviously one to all skills with the cast rate, and Alder's Boots is usually an excellent option over here on the boots because Spirit does not have any fire res on, and this will make up for that. And of course, down in your inventory, you want to get a Torch, you want to get an Annie, and you want to get a Geeds, all pretty normal. And please do fill up with Skillers down here or Magic Find Charms or whatever the best is you can get your hands on. Of course, we're talking on swap. We have a Call to Arms in double axe just for show, and another Spirit to get a couple of skills to boost up that battle orders even a little bit more. And here, no matter which way you're going, usually you're going to want to go with the Act 2 Mercenary, and here we have Holy Freeze for the extra safety. Over here we have Infinity, obviously the Conviction Aura boosting up the damage and just overall great damage output from the Act 2 Mercenary. And Darl's Visage and a Fortitude over here, a primo option for the Act 2 Mercenary. And now we'll look at the Blizzard Sorceress. If this is the one you started off with, this is probably what it looks like. And if you're Fireball and you're going to Blizzard, this is what you're going to want it to end up looking like. So we got just one into Warmth here, and we're talking about Blizzard Sorceress. We've got one into Telekinesis, Teleport, and Static. Static, just a utility spell. You could skip the 1 point if you really wanted to get it somewhere else, but I feel like it is useful. And over in the cold spells, one into Frozen Armor. And of course, you want to max out Blizzard and all of its synergies. So that's going to be Glacial Spike, that's going to be Ice Blast, and that's going to be Ice Bolt. And of course, I do come down here and we just put 1 point with this many plus skills in the Cold Mastery, gets us to minus 100. You do get a large minus from the Conviction Aura as well. So, and as you get more skillers, it's going to bump this up to minusing even higher. even if you get any more plus skills anywhere. So with endgame gear, you don't need any more than one hard point into here. If you have incredibly budget gear and you're missing a lot of plus skills, you may want to pump this up more, because I put all the remaining points here over into Frozen Orb. And the reason for that is Frozen Orb's a synergy for Ice Blast. This is what you use on individual targets while the blizzards are raining down. So I pumped up its synergy of Frozen Orb, or I mean, you could even use this if you wanted to. So incredibly budget, you have worse gear, and you put those points over into Cold Mastery to get more minus enemy cold res. And now if you're going over to the Fireball Sorceress, this is the type of skill tree you're going to want to look at. So here we just put one hard point into Frozen Armor. Then we come over to the lighting spells. We got one hard point, Telekinesis, Teleport, and Static. Exactly the same as the last one right there, with the exception of the skill tree is obviously different. So you know all those points are going to be over on the Fire Spells skill tree. So obviously I said this was a Fireballer. So we got Max Fireball, its synergies, and of course Fire Mastery, because that adds +2 fire skill damage. So Firebolt is capped out 20 hard points, 20 hard points on Meteor, and you can use this as well depending on what you are doing in the game, and maxing out Fire Mastery. Now at that point, you still have some points left over if you're in your mid 90s. So I went ahead and just put 1 point into Enchant. You can go ahead and use this on your Act 2 Mercenary. The fire damage isn't that much, but really what it does is boost the attack rating for the most part, causing him to make contact more often, and then the Crushing Blow will proc more often, actually increasing damage on bosses and things like that. This is a completely optional singular point there, but you kind of get low on what you really want to do with those points right now. So with the remaining hard points, I went ahead and just pumped them into Warmth. You could do something over by pumping up the radius of Static, or if you really wanted to, you could go ahead and do some secondary skill on these ones, but this is the way I go with it here for the Fireball Sorceress. Next up, you see a very commonly played character right here. We're taking a look at the Paladin, and this is going to be if you're swapping, you're going to Respec from the Hammerdin over to the Fist of the Heavens Paladin, or vice versa. Now, Paladins, unlike other characters, you don't necessarily go just max Vita with just enough strength to wear your gear. You do the strength thing the same, just enough to wear your gear, but then put points into dexterity in order to have a 75% chance to block. That's the max you can get when you have Holy Shield active. So this number is going to vary for you based upon many different factors. So depending on your gear, usually you want to just go ahead and get it up till you get 75, and usually I might put a few extra 5 or 10 into it just in case, depending. So, and then you go ahead and put the rest into Vitality after that. Strength to wear your gear, it's going to be a lot lower because you don't necessarily need to wear a Spirit Monarch. You could have Paladin spirits over here that have even like 100 strength or even less with lower bases. So we obviously jumped off of the Oculus that we had on the Sorceress, and on both of these Paladins, you're going to want to go ahead and use a Heart of the Oak. Essentially everything else is the same besides this as that Sorceress prior, and the shield over here, instead of a Spirit Monarch, we have a Pally Spirit. This one's a little bit higher of strength, I suppose, for a Pally Spirit, 142, but it is a Zakarum shield. These ones can come with up to 45 all res on the base. So you can definitely find one with lower strength requirements. You may want to go ahead and do that for yourself. And as for the Mercenary, it's going to be a little bit up to you, but usually people go with Holy Freeze Aura because you know, just for the extra safety. But if you're using Redemption, maybe you don't want the bodies to shatter, you could use a different Act 2 Mercenary if you would like. But unlike the other one that had an Infinity over here, you're going to want to have an Insight here on your Hammerdin or your Fist of Heavens Paladin just to go ahead and keep your mana up. You could go with a Reaper's Toll, you could go with a lot of other options using the Redemption to keep your mana up, but I usually go with the Insight just for quality of life's sake. But of course, the most difference between the two here, we have the skill tree. So when you're respecing between the two, first of all, obviously you want to max out Blessed Hammers here on the combat skill tree. Take note of the synergies down there, Blessed Aim and Vigor. So we're going to max out both of those. Now, of course, we want to get down to Holy Shield, and you want to try to max this out as well. I didn't quite have enough skill points to go ahead and do that right now on this particular character, but eventually I will. Jumping over to Offensive Auras, we want to go ahead and max out. One of them was Blessed Aim, but another aura you want to go ahead and max out is Concentration. Now, this actually boosts up the damage of your hammers a ton. So you're going to want to have this out and rocking when you're actually throwing said hammers. Jumping over to Defensive Auras, go ahead and max out Vigor. That's obviously a synergy, and I usually 1 point wonder into Redemption, and I usually keep that on the offhand. So check out just below my character. I'll kill all the monsters, my mana might be low, or maybe my life will be down. Swap over to Redemption real quick, and pop right back up. And of course, you could just go ahead and hotkey it as well like that, and swap super quick, and then go ahead and move on as well, up to you. Now looking at the Fist of the Heavens skill tree right here, obviously, boom, we're capping out the skill that the build is named for right here, FOH, and we're going to max out the Holy Bolt as well. You use this skill when attacking things like individual monsters, maybe Diablo at the end of a chaos run or something like that. And it's also a synergy here, but don't get it twisted. The Holy Shock synergy down here is essentially pointless. All it does is add lightning damage, or increases that damage, excuse me, to the one individual monster that you rain down the Fist of the Heavens on, and then the Holy Bolts go out from there. Those Holy Bolts that come out of the Fist of the Heavens have no lightning damage on it at all. It only goes on that one individual monster. So unless you're trying to boost up single target for like you're sniping cows in a cow level or something, which would be just incredibly idiotic, you don't even want to really worry about that Holy Shock until maybe incredibly a lot later if you need it for some reason. So as we move over to offensive auras, you may have no points into this if you're a lower level Fist of the Heavens Paladin. Don't worry about that. I do go ahead and put 1 point down here into Fanaticism, so you can just have that 1 point Fanaticism and 1 point to Smite, easily take out Declone, and you can even farm the Ubers with that, just 1 point to Smite, 1 point to Fanaticism. And you did notice here, this is the very last thing I did just in case I ever do want to deal damage to one individual monster for some odd reason. My remaining points, I only had like 3 or 4 left over. I did come down and get them in the Holy Shock for that synergy, but that's just the very least important thing to do. Coming over on defensive auras, I actually capped out Defiance, increases the defense being a synergy for Holy Shield in order to get hit less, so your survivability is even better, so you don't need to worry about it. Another great 1 point wonder, Redemption. Use it all the time to get your life and mana back. And just for party play's sake, I did put 1 into Salvation, if at any point we needed that to help out a full party. One of the great things about swapping between these two, as for the gear, there's literally absolutely nothing that you need to do. You can use the exact same gear you had on the Hammerdin or Fist of the Heavens Paladin. They swap out perfectly fine. You don't have to change a thing. And now here's a character that not a lot of people start with, but it's an incredibly fun one. You could be starting off with the Tornado Druid, or you could be starting off with the Fire Druid, and you could respec either way, and you'll end up with a new build that is incredibly fun. Now, super standard right up here, max Vita build right there. And for both of them, nothing really got to be different. Taking a look at the gear, it's exactly the same as that Fist of the Heavens Paladin and the Hammerdin. It's just all the standard caster stuff right here. With the one exception is if you're swapping to the Fire version, there are going to be different ways to perfectly min-max the character. You could go with a Flickering Flame up here instead of a Shaco. You could go over here with a Phoenix Shield that has minus fire res on it as well. And obviously, swapping anything around to reach individual FCR breakpoints is going to be something you're going to probably want to do as well. But besides that, the standard caster gear is the way to go. Mercenary, we got the same cold, and you could make an argument going with Insight or Infinity depending on what you want to actually use. I have an Insight here right now, but throwing on Infinity would boost up the damage a little bit. So that's generally the Mercenary you go with. Now, if you're going into the Wind Druid, this is what you're going to want the skill tree to go ahead and look like. So Tornado is your main attack, and notice the 3 synergies, Cyclone Armor, Twister, and Hurricane. You also have Hurricane up all the time as well. So you want to go ahead and cap both of those out, obviously, and the synergies. So we have up here Twister and Cyclone Armor as well. Those 4 all cap. And yes, they are all pretty much synergies of each other. Over on Shapeshifting, don't do a damn thing. And then over on the Summoning, obviously you're going to want to have Oak Sage up. I just make this a 1 point wonder with the plus skills. We're at level 16. And down here at the Grizzly, we actually go ahead and just put 1 point into that. And then what we want to go ahead and do is actually cap out summon Direwolf. Now, it depends if you want to go ahead and summon up all the other summons. I don't even use the Direwolf. I only use the Bear. So why did I put these points into Direwolf? Well, actually, if you get another level into the Bear, you get less life than you do from the 15% synergy that is from summon Direwolf. And all I want to do is have this Grizzly Bear pretty much be a tank. I don't care too much about it dealing 600 damage every other second or something like that. So in order to keep it alive and just tanking all this damage, I go ahead and pump up the synergy in order to give it 4,800 life. Now, if you are swapping to the Fire Druid, there's a few different ways you could go with a couple of these points here, so I'll point that out. And not quite high enough level to cap out all these fire skills down the side here, but you're going to want to cap them all out if you're high enough and you have enough skill points. And that's capping all of Firestorm, Molten Boulder, Fissure, Volcano, and Armageddon. Now you can kind of just use all of these, just kind of throwing them all over the place. So if you can cap them all out and use them all, go ahead and do it. I went ahead and put 1 point down to Cyclone Armor. It doesn't absorb too much without any of the synergies and not having it capped out, so you could go ahead and bypass these 2 points if you wanted to and go ahead and put some more over into that side. Shapeshifting, you ain't putting nothing on this one once again. And then over here on the summons, I end up just getting 1 point down to Summon Grizzly, and I just got the 1 point to Oak Sage, depending on, and the same thing with the Wind Druid, I forgot to mention it. If you wanted to have your Meat Shield have more life, you do the Direwolf synergy, or you can go ahead and pump up your Oak Sage. It'll give you more life, and it gives it slightly more life, maybe surviving ever so slightly better, but really the Oak Sage just kind of dies all the time. You just keep respawning it over and over again. Now you're probably saying, wait a second, Phil, you already talked about the Sorceress. Well, this one's actually so different than swapping from like Blizzard to Fireball or something along those lines that it's got to have its own little section here. And this is swapping either way you want to do this, from Nova Sorceress to Lightning Sorceress, or vice versa. For this particular one, I pretty much need to go over almost everything with the build because it's so much different than really all the rest of them. Now, as for the stats, it's just enough strength and dex to wear your gear, which you notice it's incredibly much lower than what you need to wear that Spirit Monarch is, because you don't need to wear one on this build. Dexterity, you're adding nothing. Vitality, you actually, endgame, you don't want to have any extra points into this, and you dump everything into energy. And that's because for the Nova Sorceress anyways, we're going to go over first. That's going to be the Energy Shield Nova Sorceress. For this particular character, the other resistances, while not useless, they're not nearly as important as the poison resistances. The Energy Shield will actually eat this damage, and it will not eat the poison damage. That'll go towards your incredibly small life pool. Now, the endgame gear will remain incredibly the same for either one of these Nova or the Lightning Sorceress. So let's go ahead and take a look. So we're doing a self-wielded Infinity right here, that huge -55 enemy lightning res along with that Conviction aura. You could also do Crescent Moon and a Lidless or a Spirit on the other side. Crescent Moon is a really cheap rune where it just takes an and you get a bunch of minus lightning res. That's a great option there. Up here, Griffin's Eye, you could go with that Shaco if you can't get one of these, but Griffin's Eye is the primo one in this particular slot. We have a Caster Amulet here for the Sorceress. Amaras or a bunch of other options up here are going to be great. Actually, the end game piece for the armor is actually the skin of the Viper Magi. You got the resistance to skill FCR, but also the magic damage reduced. Actually works great along with Energy Shield. I'm not going to explain it all right now, but it absolutely does. Over on the gloves, we have Tranks. You could go with Mage Fists as well if you wanted to go ahead and throw that over there. For this build, for Nova Sorceress, you do want to get to 105, so keep that into consideration if you're going from Lightning over to Nova. We have a couple of SOJs, we have an Arachnus Mesh, and we've got Sandstorm Treks. Now, swap around any of these rings here if you need to get up to 105, or if you want to have Magic Find, if you want the more skills. It's going to depend on what FCR you need based upon what gear you got in order to get to a breakpoint. Of course, Torch, Anti-Geats down in the inventory per normal. And over on the other side, we got a Call to Arms. And generally, I throw a Lidless over here. I don't have one on hand. Please do excuse me. But that one extra skill from a Lidless, they're real cheap and they have a really low strength requirement. Now, the Mercenary is almost completely different than other ones, with small exceptions I'll go over right here. So you go with the Prayer Mercenary. This goes ahead and actually replenishes your life, but there's a weird interaction. Once again, I can't go over every single thing in this video. It'll be 25 minutes long, but just know that your life will shoot up if you go with this Mercenary this way. With a Prayer Mercenary, we have an Insight Mercenary, so the meditation aura keeps your mana pool incredibly high, and the mana is actually your life with Energy Shield Sorceress, so that's important. And of course, there is that interaction between meditation. It has a small prayer aura with it, so the prayer aura there, prayer aura here. You have Cure up here, a new helm on ladder if you're on non-ladder. Ooh, sorry, bro, you can't exactly make this, but the Cleansing Aura gets rid of poison and any curses super fast. And Cleansing Aura also has a new small prayer aura along with it. It's a crazy little interaction. You have to look it up. But if you go Cure, Insight with a Prayer Mercenary, if your life drops down, it'll chunk up like 4 times and completely fill up. Now, we need to make up things that we don't have because the helmet and stuff, so we need Life Leech and we need All Res. So that's why most of the time endgame people go with Chains of Honor on their Act 2 Prayer Mercenary for the Energy Shield Nova Sorceress specifically. I think I stumbled those words a little bit there. You know what I'm saying. Now for the Energy Shield Nova Sorceress, we're maxing out Nova, its synergy of Static, which is really cool. You use that all the time as well. And of course, Lightning Mastery to boost up lightning damage. Now the energy shield is what keeps us alive when we put all of our points down into mana. So you actually want to go ahead, and this is generally how I do it. I'll get some points into energy shield. Usually as I'm leveling up, I go half and half, 1, 1, 1, 1 as I need to do it. So right here, I actually went ahead and maxed out telekinesis, and then I have my remaining points into energy shield. That synergy of minusing the amount of mana consumed when you take damage is crucially important. But really, in a few levels, or you get some of your other skill quests done that I don't quite have done yet here, these are both optimally going to be capped out at 20 apiece. Now looking at the other sides, I just got 1 hard point into warmth, we got 1 hard point in the frozen armor, but usually you can cap out all of this stuff in here that you need to. So 20, 20, 20, 20, 20, and then your remaining points go over into warmth. Since mana recovery, that is actually life recovery on an energy shield Nova Sorceress. Now, as for gear, anything that I didn't mention on the previous Nova Sorceress little section about the Lightning Sorceress, either swapping one way or the other, you could perfectly just as acceptable throw the Infinity over here, go with a standard mercenary right here, the Cold Aura, or you could go with the Prayer Mercenary here on the Lightning Sorceress as well. So it's going to be up to you depending on what you want to do and what gear you actually have. But now looking over the skill tree, we just got a 1 point wonder warmth, we got 1 point wonder into frozen armor, and then we're taking a look at the lightning skill tree, obviously where most of the points are going. It's a lightning sorceress, so we're maxing out lightning and preferably every single one of the synergies. So that's charge, bolt, nova, and chain lightning. I don't quite have them all maxed out, but I would love to here in just a few skill points when I get them. Of course, we want to get down to the 1 point wonders of telekinesis and teleport, and that's all you got to do respecing from Nova Sorceress over to the Lightning Sword. So next up, we're taking a look at how to respec from one Necromancer to another, but not just 2, to 3 different ones. Really, you can use almost the same gear with the exception of just a little swap, which I will go over for swapping from one Necromancer to another, the Summon, the Bone Necro, and the Poison Necromancer. Now, all of these go with the general, completely standard, max Vita build, just enough strength to wear your gear. And when you're looking at that gear, first of all, we're going to look at the Bone Necro, and for the Summon Necro, and even the Poison Necro is almost all the same, but there's just something ever so slightly different. This is all the same standard caster gear that you can go with when you're rocking out a lot of the builds that I went over in the first place. So this all kind of stays the same right here. But if you're going with the Poison Necro, you're going to want to throw on a Death's Web right here that has a ton of minus poison res, and that's going to be absolutely crucial. You can go ahead and throw a Bramble armor on if you want to. I usually don't, but it does have even more minus poison res, and since you're a Poison Necro, that's going to be crucial. And there is also a really budget way to get more minus poison res, and you can go ahead and go with 3-piece Trangs of the Trangle's Claw, the gloves, the belt, and the Trang's head over here that gives you, I believe it's minus 25 enemy poison res. They're pretty cheap. You get Cannot Be Frozen right here. Obviously, all of them, you're going to want to go ahead and use Trang's gloves on the Necromancer anyways, but you also get +2 poison skill damage right here. So the 3-piece Trangs between those 3 pieces right there are a great option for the Poison Necro. And when you are the Necromancer, don't go with that Cold Aura Mercenary that you usually go with a lot of builds, because you don't want the bodies to shatter. You want to have something to use your Corpse Explosion on. So we go with the Might Mercenary. That way he can go ahead and get that first kill even faster. But then we go ahead and throw on the Infinity. Now the reason for this is, I know a lot of people think, well, you're actually going for physical damage or your summons to kill stuff. Why worry about that? Well, half of Corpse Explosion is fire damage, so you're boosting up with the Conviction Aura half of the Corpse Explosion. Also, Conviction Aura actually has a way to lower the monster's defense, meaning your summons and your mercenary will make contact more often, getting the first kill or multiple kills faster, just causing your clear speed to increase. The other stuff staying the same, and Darl's Visage and Fortitude. Now, looking at the skill tree, it's going to be pretty interesting because this is a Summon Necro first off, so we're maxing out Raise Skeleton and Skeleton Mastery. The Skeleton Mages don't work that great. I don't even bother bringing them up, to be perfectly honest. It'll be up to you. I do go ahead and get 1 point down to Revives, just in case you want to use them in certain instances. But also, we want to go ahead and get our Iron Golem, because you see our Iron Golem walking around, he is made out of an Insight, so that way we keep our mana up with our Meditation Aura. There's a little guy right there. Now, you'd think you want to go ahead and max out Iron Golem, but that's not what you want to actually do. The thing is, you want him to stay alive. You don't want to have to go through a bazillion Insights. So what you want to actually do is max out Golem Mastery. That actually is how you increase the life of any of your golems, and your Iron Golem is no different. So 1 point in Iron Golem, max Golem Mastery, and then we got 1 point in down in the Summon Resist. At this point, every 2 points with a few plus skills. Here we're at current skill level of 19. It takes 2 points to get 1% of all res, and then after just a short time, it takes 3 hard points to get 1%. So don't worry about putting more points into that particular spot. Now, obviously, Corpse Explosion is one of the best skills in the entire game. Go ahead and max it out. It has no synergies, just as is. Super awesome, maxed out. We got 1 point into Bone Armor. I will talk about this again in just 1 second, but we go ahead and use that. Over on Curses, this is where I put all of my remaining points. Now, putting more points into amp damage doesn't actually increase the damage output anymore. That's strictly for my preference, quality of life thing, to where I can just cast it, boom. The entire screen, even off the screen, is covered by some of the amplified damage. That way you don't have to go ahead and make sure you covered all the monsters, really pay attention. You click the middle of the screen, boom, everything's covered. You don't have to worry about it. Now, you could go ahead and, if you want to be that person that just puts 1 hard point into amp damage and put more points over here into either Bone Armor or one of the synergies, Bone Wall, because actually an extra level into Bone Armor gives you the same damage absorb as an extra point into the synergy. You could go ahead and do that if you would like to, but I like the quality of life just pumping up amp damage. So that'll boost up the damage of your mercenary, of your summons, and like I said, half of Corpse Explosion is physical, half fire, so it'll boost up half of the damage of Corpse Explosion. Now we're going to take a look at if you respec to a Bone Necro. Now, generally for Bone Necros, you go ahead and use Bone Spear. Now it has 4 synergies, all the exact same amount. You're usually going to struggle to get enough points in order to max all this stuff out. In fact, I think if you put points into literally anything else, I don't believe you actually can, because that would be 100 points just for maxing out Bone Spear and its synergies. Leaves you not a lot left to work with. So, and especially at the level of and the amount of skill points I have for this character, I couldn't max them all out, but obviously max out Bone Spear, and you go ahead and see that Bone Wall and Prison are both synergies for this. Well, that actually happens that they are also both synergies for Bone Armor. So you're going to want to go ahead and max those out if at all possible. So I got Bone Wall maxed out, Bone Prison nearly maxed out. And if you do end up with more points left over at the very end, put them into either Teeth or Bone Spirit, whichever one you think there may be a small chance that you go ahead and use. Obviously, we're maxing out Corpse Explosion because it's such a great, powerful skill. Now, over in the summoning tree, you still want to have that Iron Golem made out of an Insight once again. So we're going to get down to Iron Golem, 1 point into that, and max out Golem Mastery. Once again, keeping your Iron Golem alive pretty much eternally. It does get taken out once in a while if you're not watching and you get the wrong auras, but you understand. Looking over at Curses, now I don't have the extra points left over in order to get the quality of life you do on the Summon Necro. So this is just 1 hard point into amplified damage. Now Bone Spear, you see this is plus magic damage per level, so it does amp damage. Just getting 1 point of that boosts up, you know, half the damage of the Corpse Explosion, along with definitely boosting up the amount of damage that like your mercenary is putting out. And now we're going to take a look at the Poison Necro, and do remember, if you're just skipping around, you found this point, don't forget Poison Necro, you're usually going to want to get a D-Web, maybe throw on a 3-piece Trang set, and you could go with Bramble on the body armor, but for Poison Necro, we're using Poison Nova, so max that out, 20 hard points, and both its synergies of Poison Explosion and Poison Dagger. We just got 1 point over into Bone Armor. You can use it a little bit, it does go away quite quick, but I would say just recommend go ahead and have it up if you can. And Corpse Explosion, you want to try to max it out. This was kind of the last one I actually got points to be honest. Usually you're going to be high enough level to have enough points to get this much higher, maybe even capped out, but at the skill level that I got in this current Necromancer wasn't quite there, but I do want to get this capped out. Now, of course, though, you don't want your Iron Golem dying all the time, and just like on every other version, we got 1 point down to Iron Golem. We maxed out Golem Mastery so it won't die, and just 1 point into Summon Resistance, usually enough hard points if you have any plus skills gear. Also hopping over to the Curses, this time we're not going to go with amp damage the way we did with the other two, because we're using Poison, so we get down to lower resistance. Now this lowers all resistances minus 63 for the current level that I have it in. I only got 1 hard point into it. As you put more hard points into it, it will lower, but at this point, once again, it takes like 2 points to get minus like 1 res. So I don't think the points are going to be worth it. Now this is unlike Conviction. This does lower their poison resistance. Conviction Aura on Infinity does not. But once again, we're still using Infinity the whole time on our Mercenary for all these builds, because like we're still using Corpse Explosion, half fire and half physical, so it boosts up half of that damage. All you got to do to respec between all 3 of these Necros, whichever one you kind of decide you want to try. So if you're getting a little stale on the build that you're doing, try respecing over to one of these other ones that are incredibly easy. You can just get 1 token and it's over, and you're playing a brand new fun build. Don't forget the like button and subscribe up before you go. Peace out, fellas, and keep slaying.